Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our fades and sleepers for this week's Wells Fargo Championship. Gonna break down the game theory aspect of what to strategize for in these large field GPPs and go over two of the more overhyped and two underhyped plays going into lock that you might want to consider either avoiding or perhaps getting to for some ownership leverage in those large field contests. This is probably the most important part of your process every single week. Projecting players, modeling, all of that is fun in games, especially for the outright betting market. But when we're playing against other users in a GPP and a head-to-head format like what we have on Draftkings, FanDuel, etc., you have to be considering this game theory aspect. It's how you leverage the field, give yourself a true edge over your opponents, and build plus EV lineups. So we'll be focusing on that and again going over some of those overhyped and underhyped plays. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. All right, we're starting with the fades, the guys a little bit overhyped going into this week that you might want to consider avoiding in some of these large field GPPs. And first off is a very dangerous fade, and I feel like I'm fading Cantlay a lot more often than not, but especially at these Bermuda grass kind of tracks where for his career he's really struggled and in fact hasn't even played much over here on Bermuda grass. He's likely not as familiar with it, not as comfortable on Bermuda grass, and when you take a look at his around the green and then especially his putting stats over here on the East Coast this time of year, doesn't typically go all that well for Patrick Cantlay. So we take a look at the Poetrivolous splits. You can see he's gaining 0.18 strokes per round. So it's not like he goes from an elite level putter down to a Luke List or anything along those lines, but it's still about 0.12 shots worse per round. You take a look at the last 4 or 5 events, he's actually losing strokes putting. And of course, all of those were on this Poetrivolous overseed. So that lack of familiarity is certainly shown up on the stat profile over the last month or so. But the reason why everyone is jumping on board, and it's quite evident, is the ball striking has been the best in the world. There's no other comparison to it. He's gaining over a stroke per round off the tee, a stroke per round on approach, and even if we zoom out a little bit, the ball striking remains, right? He's still gaining close to a stroke per round off the tee, a little bit over half a stroke per round with the approach play. So while he's been Superman over the last 3 or 4 events, that's unlikely to continue going forward. My main worry here is you have so many options around Cantlay that, outside of that recent form are the same, if not better plays. And then when you add in that Bermuda grass struggle that he has from time to time, I'd much rather get to a Xander, who's about half as owned, right? You've got Tony Finau coming in off a win, who's lower owned. Colin Morikawa, who I really don't like from a course fit perspective, is still significantly lower owned than a Cantlay. Rory McIlroy, of course, is actually even lower owned than Cantlay as well, albeit about 0.5%. So there's not a huge difference ownership-wise between the two, but Rory McIlroy is a specialty, especially around the green on Bermuda grass. A lot of his wins have come on Bermuda. This Poetrivolous overseed, maybe not the best surface from putting-wise, but he has 3 wins around Quail Hollow, right? So the track record difference between Cantlay and then some of the players around him is why I think this 22.6% number on him is just a little bit too high for my liking. If you're going to take pieces of chalk up top, I think there's 2 to really worry about, right? It's Rory McIlroy, also Patrick Cantlay. Just pick one of the 2 and move on, right? If not fading both of them for game theory concerns. So I'll still be playing Rory. He, of course, was a core play the other day, so I'm not talking myself off of him here. But as a result, I cannot be taking the 2 guys over 20% up here in the 10K range. It's unsustainable. It's going to take me away from too many players here in the 9K range. So part of it is forced because of Rory McIlroy there. But like I said, those Bermuda grass concerns are legit here. You take a look at the event history, I don't even think he's played this. He missed the cut the first time he ever played here. The recent form has been outstanding, 3rd, 14th. Was in contention at the Heritage 2, right? Nearly won that golf tournament. Was in that final group. It was a blast to watch in person. He was getting heckled out there for the slow play. And yeah, somebody I'm just going to have to avoid in these large field contests. On the other end of that spectrum, this is a much more calculated fade. Now, up top, a lot of that was because of the Rory exposure. Alejandro Tosti should not be 6.5% owned. And you may say, 6.5%? That's not all that crazy, except when you compare it to the guys around him, where he's 10, 15, sometimes 20 to 30 times higher owned than some of his peers. And Alejandro Tosti, while I love the off the tee play, I like the fact that he's hot coming in off the Korn Ferry Tour. It is such a different level of competition playing in one of these elevated field events at a golf course that's an absolute bear, especially around and on the greens. So last week at the Mexico Open, I actually thought it was a decent spot for Tosti, but in GPPs, he came in 12% owned. Now, there's a lot more names down here in the 6K range this week where he's not going to be that 12% number. At least I'm not expecting it, right? Still got him at 6.5%, which is ridiculous here for the mid 6K range. But last week, he had simple greens, simple around the green shots. It was much more, resemblant of something like a Korn Ferry Tour course than what you're going to get this week, which is a major championship type of test. So for Tosti, I think it might be a little bit over his head in terms of difficulty. And again, when he's 10, 15, sometimes 20, even 30 times higher owned than some of the other guys around him, then I think you need to consider that fade, just going to anyone around him that has even remotely the same kind of skill set. I mean, just the one that really stands out to me would be a Matthew Neesmith, who's made the cut here in multiple trips to Quail Hollow. Similar ball striker when he's playing well to somebody like a Tosti, who's both long and accurate off the tee. In about, I believe he was like 0.4, 0.5% owned the last time I checked there with good old Matty Neesmith, compared to the 6.5% number that you have over there. Again, about a 15x difference between the two ownership numbers. And now that we've gone through our fades, gone the negativity out of the way, let's go over a few sleeper plays, right? So the other side of things, guys that I think are not being steamed up, guys I've not heard talked about very often this week, that I think are excellent fits for Quail Hollow. Number one's a past winner here. It's Jason Day. And, a few months ago, everyone was riding the hot hand here. He was going out there, ball striking it, gaining across all four categories. And if you look at the last 36 rounds, you can see that, right? Gaining across all four categories. His worst category is around the green, where we know he's one of the best chippers of the golf ball of all time, let alone in this field. Gaining over half a stroke per round with the ball striking categories, 0.6 strokes per round with the putting. I mean, what's not to like there? And even if you zoom in over, let's say not the best stretch of golf for him, he's still gaining over the last, over all four categories, nearly a stroke per round around the green, right? That's what we're used to seeing from good old Jason Day, and 0.7 strokes per round with the putter. He's been outstanding. I mean, even in this quote-unquote slump that he's been in, when you combine the event history is where you start to get real excited here. You can see 15th, did miss the cut there, did finish 24th, but win. Before that, a bunch of other top 25 finishes, so has a ton of experience around this track as well. And what I really like about his ownership this week is that he's being squeezed a bit. He's around a Victor Hovland, who I have projected as the highest owned player on the entire slate. Sungjae Im, who's in the high teens in terms of ownership. Justin Thomas, who is clearly mispriced, who's also getting close to 20% ownership. And then you've got Jason Day here. He was only 12.5% right now, and honestly, in higher stakes contests, I think is going to be single-digit owned for this week. So given the fact that he's won here before, the recent form, he's playing some of the best golf he has in the last 5-6 years, right? Let alone, what we've seen over the last 4 months, which has been, again, gaining nearly 2 strokes per round over his last 36 rounds. Likes the Poetrivolous surface. Sign me up for Jason Day, right? Put him in 25-30% of my GPP lineups, and hope to get a little bit different there with perhaps some of my lineups that are starting with the chalky Rory McIlroy, right? By adding in a Jason Day as your second man in, as opposed to, let's say, the JTs, the Victor Hovlands, who I really like this week, but are way higher owned than a Jason Day, I can start differentiating that lineup for some of the bigger contests that I'll be entering. And next up, in the last little sleeper we'll talk about, who I think is right at that same ownership number, right, 12.5%, is Sam Burns. And anytime we get on this Poetrivolous overseed, I'm going to want to run to Sam Burns. I mean, multiple time winner at Valspar. Shows up at all of these golf courses this time of year with the flat stick. And if you take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, you'll see it, right? Gaining a stroke per round with the putter. Everything else has been pretty decent. He's always going to be a prolific gainer off the tee. The approach play can be a little bit inconsistent. In the event history, there's not a ton here to work with, but he's at least played here twice. He played during the President's Cup, which is a little bit of added experience for him to work on there. But T55 withdrew there 3 years ago, or I should say 4 years ago, We have no idea what the reasoning for that. So that's, probably nothing that you want to hold against him too much. It could have very well just been an injury, could have been a sickness. I mean, like I said, I have no idea why he withdrew that year, but it's more about the course fit here. Loves the greens. He's long and accurate off the tee. The off the tee looks very similar to what you get at the Wells Fargo Championship, where it's like long, tree-lined shoots that you have to hit down, where you have to shape your ball properly on some of the dog legs. And the rough isn't all that penal, which also plays into his skill set, right? He's not always the most accurate driver. He's not going to hit the most fairways. A lot of that is because of how far he hits the ball. He's not going to have to worry about that all that much this week. Just keep it generally online, which is something that he tends to do very well. Lean into that approach play and just light it up on these greens. I not only think that Sam Burns is live for GPPs, right, to finish in the top 5, top 10, but I think it's live to actually win this golf tournament as well. He has more than enough firepower to get there. He's one of the better course fits on the entire slate. And kind of like a Jason Day, he's being squeezed in terms of ownership. You have Cameron Young, who's the second highest owned player on the slate, priced just above him. I mean, JT's only a few guys above that. Below him, I'd say Hatton is getting a fair amount of ownership. So Sam Burns, I think just at this low ownership number is a great target to go after. He has the upside we're looking for. And especially if you're starting with one of your chalkier builds. Let's say you're starting with, let's say you go down here and you start with like a couple 9K guys. Let's say it's like Jordan, maybe use Victor there, right? You need to differentiate at some point up top, right? So this is where like a Sam Burns, or even, if you want to throw in a Jason Day into that argument as well, comes in really handy. And why these videos, this game theory aspect of DFS is so important, because not only do we need to get leverage to the field, we need to make sure we're not duplicating ourselves with, trains of thousands of other lineups that have the same 3-on-3 as us in some of these big contests, especially when I'm playing in a 71,000 entry contest this week. That's the $5 GPP. There's 71,000 entries. So I have to make sure that, when I'm building lineups, I'm going to be doing this on an optimizer. If I'm starting with some of these chalky plays, it forces in one of these low-end plays. And it's not just a J Day, a Sam Burns. There's a few other guys I really like in this 8K range that are coming in at low ownership. And in the 7K range, there's a lot of sub 3% owned guys that I'm trying to force into those lineups. So I hear all the time in terms of game theory that you can't play the chalk. It's impossible to leverage the chalk, so on and so forth. You just have to be more cognizant when you do so, right? Like Rory McIlroy kills this golf course. He's going to get that attention. I don't think that means that you have to fade him, right? Just work, ways around Rory McIlroy to make your lineup still leveraged and plus EV to the field. If you're going to play, let's say, a Spieth who's getting attention this week. You guys know I love Spieth. You already know I'm playing him this week, right? I don't think I had to tell you that. You have to work around it, right? He's getting some ownership this time around. Victor Hovland especially. We talked about Cameron Young as a core play, right? All of these guys are getting a bunch of ownership. Don't be afraid of using those plays. They are some of the best plays on the slate. There's a reason why they're getting that attention. Just mix in a few of these low-end plays, and you'll be good to go. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the fades and sleepers. Before you hop on out of here, smash that like button, and also comment down below who first off you're fading this week, and one low-owned play that you'll be getting to that you don't think many others will have in their repertoire as well. So fade and sleeper there for you guys. But I appreciate all the support. We'll be back for the live stream tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll be touching on the weather, all of your questions there. We'll go through the chalk again, some ownership concerns for perhaps our core plays, and then prop content, just everything you need to know to get ready for this week. So again, that'll be a little bit later on this evening, 7 p.m. Eastern time. There should be a link down below in the description to that. Also, check out the community contest. There's a link down there to that too. $1 and, obviously playing for some bragging rights, a little bit of money on the line, and also to make sure you can get your lineup reviewed there on Monday. So, three-headed monster there, get in there as well. And of course, make sure to join the Patreon page if you haven't already to get access to all of my ownership projections, my entire player pool, everything that was blacked out on the spreadsheet during the video is able to be accessed there on my Patreon page. So if you're looking for that kind of access, just take a look at that in the description as well. But until next time, I appreciate all the support, like I said before, and I'll catch you guys for that live stream at 7.